The zip tie around the banker's box cut into her palm, but Victoria Hale didn't adjust her grip. She had spent 11 years building Hale Capital Group from a two-desk operation in a sublease on the third floor of a building that smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. 11 years of 6 a.m. calls with overseas partners, of turning down acquisitions that felt wrong in her gut, of hiring people she believed in and cutting people who didn't perform. 11 years of being the youngest woman to ring the bell on a private equity deal over $200 million. She carried her own box out. She didn't ask anyone to help. She didn't say goodbye to the staff watching from behind their monitors with the particular stillness of people pretending not to watch. She pressed the elevator button with her elbow because both hands were full, and she stood facing the brushed steel doors while the numbers counted down, and she did not look back once. The fraud had been Marcus Del Rey's doing. That much would come out eventually. She was sure of it. Her CFO of 6 years, the man she had promoted twice, the man whose daughter she had sent a college gift to. He had been running a parallel set of books for 18 months, while Victoria sat across from institutional investors and told them with complete confidence that the fund was clean. She had believed him because she had trusted him. That was the mistake she would carry for a very long time. The Securities and Exchange Commission didn't care about trust. Neither did the board, who voted to remove her before the second press cycle had even finished. By the time the story ran in the Financial Times with a photo of her arriving at a deposition, the thing that had taken 11 years to build had about 72 hours left to exist in any recognizable form. The apartment she moved into was on the 6th floor of a building in Midtown that would have embarrassed her 3 months ago. The carpet in the hallway was the color of old mustard. The super left a note under her door about not running the dishwasher after 10. She lay on the air mattress she had ordered from her phone in a parking garage because she didn't know what else to do with her hands, and she stared at the ceiling and she thought, I don't know what I am now. She had been Victoria Hale, managing partner, for so long she had stopped being able to feel the edges of herself. She found a diner 6 blocks from the apartment. It was the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that came in a carafe whether you asked or not, and nobody looked up when she walked in because nobody cared who she was. For the first 2 weeks, that felt unbearable. Then it felt like something close to relief. She went every morning at 7:15. She ordered the same thing, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee, and she sat in the booth by the window, and she read whatever she had downloaded on her phone the night before, and she did not think about the fund. She was there on a Tuesday in March when she saw him. He came in through the side door with a little girl on his hip, maybe 4 years old, wearing a coat that was slightly too big, and boots with cartoon bears on them. The man was tall, broad-shouldered in the way of someone who had done physical work for a long time, with a face that looked like it had been tired for longer than it had any reason to be. He had a messenger bag over one shoulder and a child's backpack over the other, and he was talking to the little girl in a low voice about something, his head bent toward hers, and the little girl was patting his cheek with one flat hand like she was reassuring him. Victoria watched them for longer than she meant to. They sat 2 booths down. The waitress, older woman, name tag said Bev, came over, and the man ordered oatmeal for the little girl and coffee for himself, and then he opened the messenger bag and took out a stack of papers and started reading while the little girl ate. He read with his finger moving across the page. He made notes in the margins with a pencil. Victoria looked away. She had fired someone like him once. She had fired a lot of people over 11 years, and she had not let herself think about most of them very much. The private equity world demanded a particular kind of efficiency, and she had told herself that was what she was practicing. Efficiency, resource optimization, fiduciary responsibility. His name had been Elliot Marsh. He had been a junior analyst at the fund, quiet and precise, the kind of person who caught errors other people missed and never made a show of it. He had come to her office on a Wednesday afternoon in October 3 years ago, and he had stood in her doorway and asked if he could speak with her. She had told him she had 7 minutes. He had explained carefully that his daughter had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 2 weeks prior, that she was beginning inpatient treatment at Children's Hospital the following Monday, that he was requesting a leave of absence of 4 to 6 weeks, possibly longer depending on how the first round went. Victoria had listened to all of this. Then she had told him that the timing was very bad, that the fund was in the middle of a critical due diligence window on a deal that required all hands, that she sympathized with his situation but could not hold the position through an open-ended absence. She had said, "I sympathize with your situation," the way someone says words they have memorized rather than felt. He had nodded. He had thanked her for her time. He had left. She had not thought about it again until she was sitting in a diner in March, watching a man with tired eyes read a stack of papers while his daughter worked through a bowl of oatmeal with great seriousness. She told herself it wasn't him. The city had 9 million people. Men had daughters. Daughters wore bare boots. But the messenger bag had a patch on the strap, a small iron-on patch of a cartoon rocket ship, the edges fraying. And something about it stopped her breathing for just a moment, because she remembered that Elliot Marsh had a daughter who loved space. She remembered it because when he had left her office that afternoon, she had gone back to her desk and noticed that someone had left a drawing of a rocket ship on the communal printer, and she had assumed it belonged to a child who had come to visit a parent, and she had thrown it away. She left $2 more than usual on the table. She left before they did. The SEC investigation cleared her of criminal liability 4 months later. The finding was what she had known it would be. She was negligent in her oversight, not complicit in the fraud. It didn't matter much. The fund was gone. Her name was in the financial press with words like embattled and disgraced attached to it, and those words had a way of following a person into rooms before they even arrived. She had tried to consult. She had reached out to 3 people she had considered friends in the industry and received 2 non-replies, and 1 very gracious email explaining that the timing wasn't right. She had applied, through a recruiter, for a director-level position at a mid-size firm in Connecticut and gotten to the 3rd round before someone recognized her last name. She had savings. Not what she'd had, but enough to live carefully for a year, maybe 18 months, if she was honest with herself about what carefully meant. She was learning to be honest about things she had previously preferred to estimate. She was coming out of a CVS on a Thursday evening in April when she almost walked into him. Elliot Marsh. He was standing just outside the door with the little girl. Older now. Her hair grown out since the bare boots, but the same child, unmistakably, and a grocery bag in each hand, trying to manage both bags and the child, reaching for something in his coat pocket. He looked up when the door opened. Victoria stopped. He looked at her the way people look at someone they're not certain they recognize. Then his face settled into something she couldn't name, not anger, not warmth, something more like a person deciding carefully how to arrange themselves. "Ms. Hale," he said. "Elliot." She said his name before she could stop herself. Then, "I'm sorry, I almost didn't. It's fine." He shifted the bags. "This is my daughter, Ruby." The little girl looked at Victoria with the frank, unfiltered assessment that only children do. "You have red hair," she said. "I do," Victoria said. "I have a fish named Red. That's a good name for a fish." Ruby seemed to accept this. She turned her attention back to whatever was in her father's pocket, which turned out to be a wrapped butterscotch candy. Elliot watched his daughter for a moment, then looked back at Victoria. "How are you doing?" he asked. The question was straightforward, not loaded. She had expected loaded. "I've been better," she said, which was the most honest answer she'd given anyone in months. "You?" "Same." He said it simply. He looked like he meant it. "Ruby finished her treatment in February. She's been in remission 8 months." "I'm glad," Victoria said. And then, because the sidewalk and the grocery bags and the little girl named Ruby and the fraying rocket ship on the messenger bag were all pressing on her chest at once. "Elliot, I want to say something to you." He waited. "What I did was wrong. I told myself it was professional and necessary, and I told myself a lot of things, and none of them were actually true. I cut you loose when you needed help. When your daughter needed help. And I've been trying to figure out how to say that to you for a long time. He was quiet for a moment. Ruby had unwrapped her candy and was now examining a crack in the sidewalk with deep interest. I know, he said finally. I was angry for a long time. He said it matter-of-factly, like reporting a weather pattern that had passed. I found another job eventually. It was hard for a while. I know. You couldn't have known that. No, she said, but I could have cared more than I did. I didn't care enough, and I knew I didn't, and I kept doing it anyway. He looked at her for a long moment. The evening traffic moved behind him. Ruby found something interesting about the crack and crouched down to look at it more closely. Ruby, don't touch the sidewalk, he said, without looking away from Victoria. Then to her, where are you working now? I'm not, she said. Not really. Consulting trying to. The name is a problem. I heard about the fund. Everyone heard about the fund. The CFO? Yes. He nodded slowly. He looked like he was thinking about something. Do you over on Lexington? Smaller firm. They do valuation work mostly. Some restructuring. I know of them. I work there now. I'm a senior analyst. My manager's been talking about bringing in someone with fund side experience for a new client engagement. They're not. He paused. It's not what you're used to. The compensation isn't. Elliot. She stopped him. Are you offering to put in a word for me? He considered this. I'm saying it might be worth a conversation. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was trying to understand what it meant that the man she had let go, the man whose daughter had been in a hospital for months, while she was completing a due diligence window, was standing on a sidewalk offering her a path back to work. Why? She asked. He thought about it. Because Ruby's okay, he said, and because I don't really have the energy to hold it anymore. And because he looked at his daughter, who had stood back up and was now reaching for his hand. Because she'd probably tell me to be nice. Ruby looked up at him with butterscotch on her chin. Daddy, that lady has sad eyes. Elliot looked at Victoria. She's very observant, he said quietly. She is, Victoria said. Her throat felt tight. She crouched down to be at Ruby's level. You know what? She said to the little girl. I think they might get less sad. Ruby considered this with great seriousness, the way 4-year-olds consider everything. Because of the job? Maybe. Or maybe because of nice people. Ruby nodded like this made complete sense. Then she held out the second butterscotch from her father's pocket. She had apparently retrieved it at some point without either adult noticing and offered it to Victoria. Victoria took it. She met with Meridian's managing director, a careful man named Howard Park, 2 weeks later. She was honest with him about everything. The investigation, the findings, the press coverage, the gap in her record. She did not minimize any of it. She put it on the table the way you put a problem on a table when you are no longer pretending you can hide it. Howard Park listened to all of it and then asked her 3 questions about methodology. She answered them. He asked a 4th. She answered that too. He called Elliot into the room at the end. Elliot sat down and Howard said, You've worked with her directly. And Elliot said, Yes. And Howard said, You're Reed. And Elliot said, She's the best analyst I've ever watched work. She missed things because she trusted the wrong person. That happens. Howard offered her a contract position. 12 months, project basis, with the understanding that it would be reviewed at the end of the engagement. It was not what she was used to. The office was on the 7th floor of a building that didn't have a doorman. The conference room had a whiteboard that squeaked. The coffee machine made one kind of coffee, and it was not good coffee. She said yes before he finished the sentence. The engagement was a restructuring case for a manufacturing company in Ohio. Victoria worked 14-hour days and produced the kind of analysis that made Howard stop in the middle of reading it and come to find her in the conference room to ask a follow-up question, which he then stood there reading the answer to for 4 minutes without speaking. She worked alongside Elliot on the valuation components. They didn't talk about the past. There wasn't really a need to. The work was the work, and the work had its own rhythm, and they found theirs. Sometimes Ruby came in on Friday afternoons. There was a small table in the break room that someone had put a box of colored pencils on, and Ruby would sit there and draw things. Mostly rockets, occasionally horses, once a very ambitious submarine, while Elliot finished his week. Howard's assistant brought her apple juice and acted like this was completely normal, which eventually it was. Victoria brought her a book about the solar system one Friday because she had seen her drawing planets, and the drawings were better than the book Victoria had found, honestly, but she brought it anyway. Ruby looked at every page with the focused attention of someone doing research. Then she looked up and said, "Did you know Saturn has 83 moons?" "I didn't know that," Victoria said. "Most of them don't have names yet," Ruby said. "I'm going to name some of them when I'm older." "I think that's a reasonable plan," Victoria said. Elliot, who had been watching this from the doorway, looked away before she could see his expression. 8 months into the contract, the Ohio engagement closed successfully. Howard brought Victoria on permanently. She negotiated the title and the terms with the same precision she had once applied to 9-figure deals, and if Howard noticed that she no longer negotiated with the edge she'd once been known for, the particular coldness that had made her effective, and also, she now understood, made her capable of doing real harm, he didn't mention it. She sent Elliot a note the day the contract was signed. Paper, not email. She wrote it 4 times before she got the words right, and even then she wasn't sure they were right, only that they were true. "You didn't owe me anything. I want you to know I understand that. What you did wasn't small, and I won't pretend it was. I'm going to spend a long time trying to be the kind of person who would have done the same for you." He wrote back on a piece of Ruby's drawing paper, a corner torn from a larger sheet that still had the edge of a rocket on it. "Ruby says Saturn's moons are waiting." Ish put it on her desk. She kept it there. The woman who had walked out of her own office carrying her own box, with a zip tie cutting into her palm and 11 years of wrong priorities packed into 2 cubic feet of cardboard, was not entirely gone. She was in there somewhere, but she had been rearranged. She had lost everything that could be taken. What she found afterward was smaller and slower, and not at all what she would have chosen. It was also, she was beginning to understand, more real than anything she had built before, because this time, when she looked around the room, she knew exactly what each thing had cost, and she would not make the mistake again of thinking that cost and value were the same thing.